If you think America's next border crackdown will happen at the airport, you're already too late. The real shift is happening somewhere quieter, more bureaucratic, and far more permanent, inside databases you'll never see. A proposal now tied to U.S. Customs and Border Protection could transform what visa-free travel actually means. Not fewer visas, not longer lines, but something deeper. 5 years of social media history, up to 10 years of email addresses, years of phone numbers, digital metadata, and expanded biometric scrutiny, all before you ever board a plane. This is not a procedural update. It's a structural change. And once structural changes are normalized, they almost never reverse. Here's the headline everyone is repeating. The proposal applies to travelers from 42 countries in the Visa Waiver program, America's closest allies, the very nations deemed low risk and trusted enough to enter the United States for up to 90 days without a visa, using only an ESTA authorization. Europe, Japan, Australia, Israel, democracies with long-standing security partnerships. Here's the subheadline fewer people are saying out loud. If even these travelers now face deep digital screening, then trusted traveler no longer exists as a meaningful category. It becomes a branding term, not a policy reality. Supporters will frame this as common sense. In a world of asymmetric threats, they argue, governments must screen earlier, deeper, and smarter. Borders are no longer just lines on maps, they're data filters. And from a narrow security perspective, that logic is coherent. The modern state doesn't only ask who you are, it asks who you're connected to, how you behave online, what patterns emerge from your digital exhaust. But that's precisely why this moment deserves scrutiny. Because when border control shifts from documents to data, the definition of reasonable expands fast and quietly. Let's slow this down. 5 years of social media history, 10 years of email addresses, years of phone numbers, digital metadata, expanded biometric identifiers. That isn't just screening, that's reconstruction. It's an attempt to rebuild a version of you from fragments, posts, connections, timestamps, many of which were never created with border control in mind. And here's the first uncomfortable truth rarely discussed. Mass data collection does not eliminate risk. It redistributes it. When governments require millions of travelers to submit deep personal histories, they are not simply checking those people. They are warehousing one of the richest identity data sets on the planet. A data set that becomes, by definition, a high-value target for criminals, for hostile intelligence services, for fraud networks, for misuse, accidental or otherwise. Even with strong safeguards, centralized data creates a single point of failure. And when that failure happens, the consequences don't land on agencies or institutions. They land on individuals, identity theft, financial fraud, exposure of family networks, long-term digital harm that crosses borders and jurisdictions. The policy conversation focuses on preventing hypothetical threats. It rarely accounts for the very real risks created by concentrating data at scale. Then there's the chilling effect, the hidden behavioral tax. You don't need to censor speech to shape it. You only need to make people believe their speech will be judged. If travelers know that 5 years of social media activity may influence whether they're allowed to enter the United States, behavior will change upstream. Journalists will self-edit. Academics will hesitate. Business travelers will sanitize timelines. Ordinary people will quietly delete posts, jokes, opinions. Not because they're dangerous, but because ambiguity becomes costly. This is how power operates in modern systems. Not through bans, but through incentives. And social media screening is not a scalpel. It's a blunt instrument with an analytics label. Algorithms do not understand context the way humans do. They struggle with sarcasm, humor, translation, cultural nuance, and irony. They confuse engagement with endorsement. They misread memes. They flag keywords without understanding intent. And when security systems are designed to Err on the side of caution. False positives are not bugs, they are features. Ask yourself a simple question. When a system misinterprets a post, who bears the cost? Not the system. The traveler. Now consider the expansion many people gloss over: family data. This proposal doesn't just look at individuals. It asks for information about family members, names, birth dates, contact details, residences. That may sound administrative, but structurally it's a major shift. It moves border screening from individual assessment to network mapping. Your eligibility becomes entangled with other people's data, other people's mistakes, other people's records, other people's digital shadows. This is how modern security increasingly operates. Not by asking only who you are, but by asking who you're connected to. The problem is that connection does not equal risk, but systems built on association rarely distinguish cleanly between the two. Supporters will default to the oldest line in the book. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. That argument misses the point entirely. The issue is not secrecy, it's control, it's proportionality, it's purpose limitation, it's how long data is stored, how it's reused, and how easily requirements expand once they're normalized. History matters here. After 9/11, emergency security measures were introduced as temporary responses. Many became permanent architecture, not because of a single democratic decision, but because institutions, once built, accumulate momentum. They seek broader coverage, deeper certainty, more data. And unlike physical barriers, data systems are easy to extend. They don't require public debate. They require a form update. That's why this moment matters more than it appears. Because even if this proposal is modified, delayed, or softened, the logic behind it signals the direction of travel. Mobility conditioned not just on nationality, but on digital legibility. Now let's talk about something policymakers consistently underestimate: uncertainty. Travel demand is highly sensitive not just to cost, but to unpredictability. If travelers don't know what qualifies as disqualifying, if they fear opaque decisions driven by automated systems, many will simply choose another destination. Not because they're hiding something, but because they don't want friction. This matters economically. The United States is entering a period where tourism competitiveness is already under pressure. Forecasts show international visitor spending weakening, and this policy lands just ahead of a global showcase moment: the 2026 FIFA World Cup. World Cup travel is a stress test: massive volume, tight schedules, fans who may never have visited the US before. When you increase documentary burden and perceived risk, even marginal drop-offs scale fast. A small percentage of confused, delayed, or discouraged travelers can ripple outward into airline bookings, hotels, restaurants, and local economies. And here's the paradox: policies framed as protecting national interests can quietly undermine them. There's also a diplomatic layer that rarely makes headlines. Many of the affected countries operate under strict privacy frameworks, especially in Europe, where data collection must be proportionate and purpose-bound. When the US demands broader data sets from allied citizens, friction doesn't stay personal. It becomes geopolitical. Immigration screening turns into data governance, and data governance is already one of the most contested arenas in global politics. Zoom out further, and this proposal reflects something deeper: declining trust in traditional credentials. For decades, passports represented mutual recognition between states. Your government vouched for you. Another government accepted that vouch with some checks. Data-driven screening signals erosion of that model. It says, documentation is no longer sufficient. We want your digital exhaust. That shift isn't inherently illegitimate, but it's revealing. It suggests institutional anxiety, a preference for verification over partnership. And once that mindset takes hold, it rarely stays contained. There's also a filtering effect that deserves attention. People with stable lives, consistent records, few online footprints, professional resources, will navigate this system more easily. People with fragmented digital histories, frequent phone changes, multiple emails, cross-border lives, multilingual posts, will face higher friction and higher error rates. That is a policy choice, even if it's never stated explicitly. So what does this all amount to? It means the border is becoming a database query. The passport is becoming a starting point, not a credential. And travel is becoming conditional on how searchable, classifiable, and explainable you are to a machine. This is not just about privacy. It's about the architecture of movement in the digital age. Because the most important question this proposal raises isn't whether it makes America safer. It's whether it quietly reshapes who gets to move, who gets delayed, and who decides what version of your past counts. No noise, no spin, just analysis. So let me ask you this, and I want your answer in the comments. If visiting the United States requires 5 years of social media history and expanded digital scrutiny, does that make you feel more secure? Or does it cross a line that ultimately pushes people away?